Hi Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Darren, good to see you.
Do you want to just start off with a bit of an introduction about yourself?
Sure, I guess I've been in the Scottish startup scene for over 2 decades now. Graduated as a computer science graduate, so software engineer by background. However, typical kind of job post-university, going to a big corporate, do a graduate scheme just wasn't for me. So I started, having done a little bit of travel, started in 2005, a small startup based here in Edinburgh, who frankly are still going. They sell an e-commerce platform for gift vouchers for high-end hotels and hospitality. 20 years later, they're profitable, relatively small team, 10 to 20, turning over good money, and that was super interesting. I think that got me into how do you build companies and recognizing that really software engineering is only one part of a bigger whole. You have to be the product. As a first engineer, I remember the first weeks I was like doing training with customers. It was really fascinating to see the whole end-to-end of that, and got the bug. Yeah. Realistically got the bug, and then, yes, very technical still and delivering lots of interesting projects, but it's the whole product lifecycle that was fascinating. From there, I kind of moved into more agency world. A company called Realize did kind of projects for financial services. Realized that wasn't the same thing. It was totally different. There was a bit of commuting to London. It was a bit on site with some of these banks. We did some interesting projects, but it wasn't for me. And I really wanted something web scale. So back in the kind of 2009, we said, well, where are we going to get something that's going to be the next, Google, Yahoo, those kind of things. And the only opportunity in 2009 was Skyscanner, certainly in Scotland and definitely in Edinburgh. So I joined Skyscanner kind of autumn 2009, as it was about 50 odd people that were moving from Leith into the town centre, bigger offices. And, at the time you're kind of struck by Gareth's ambition. I used to stand up on a chair in the reception and say, we're going to be one of the top 10 websites in the world. Like, this predates kind of the big mobile app takeoff. And so he's like, and privately he's saying we're going to be a unicorn. And he's like, well, that's what I want. If you're a software engineer in Scotland and you want to do something with millions of active users, 2009, 2010 onwards, that was it. So started there. I guess I would say that's just a journey of 8.5 years of 20 different jobs, pretty much doing everything from engineering, working across teams. We kind of stopped and started, rebuilt engineering up, rebuilt the platform several times. And by the time I was leaving, we were up at 80 million active users a month. I just built the part of the new data platform, and that was processing 500,000 data points a second. Kind of massive scale, having grown with the company from 50 people to 1,200. And at different times, I'd been in IC, I'd done architecture, and that's everything. You go on that journey and you see where it's at. And then kind of, a couple of years after C-Trip acquisition, it was like, well, this is now growing and it's sustainable and it's a great organization. But that hyper-growth pace has tailed off. And where's the next opportunity? And so kind of, right time for me. There's quite a bit of turnover, a couple of years, and kind of more leadership and engineering levels. It was kind of just the right time for a new challenge. Had a few months off, and then met Chris and Stu again through an introduction through one of their VCs, who were founders of Current Health. It was Snap 40 previously, and actually I think Gareth had invested in Snap 40 much earlier, and therefore we knew of them and had met him kind of during that Skyscanner time, but actually it was post Skyscanner that I met. So we got talking. I started helping them on different small projects, speaking to Chris, speaking to Stu about how they organize engineering and how they organize the company. And we said, look, they were looking for a COO. Wasn't quite the shape that they thought I was, but we started to work together and we said, right, let's do it. And off we go. And Current Health is probably the next success story. So Chief Operating Officer, I guess, it had more responsibility. So it wasn't just product engineering. It was, you've got hardware in that, which is different. It's business to business, business to enterprise. And you're kind of looking after everything but kind of sales and marketing and some of the customer side of things. So really fascinating. And Current Health was in the right space. So if you don't know Current Health, it was essentially a platform to deliver care at home for high acuity patients. So someone who's relatively ill, could they get post-surgical discharge earlier and be monitored from home rather than be in the hospital? Really fascinating, great problem to solve, and just the right product at the right time. Very similar to Skyscanner, it was a right product, right time, taking people where they wanted to get to. Current Health is a totally changed the dynamic of care, and it was a nice to have until the pandemic. And the pandemic comes, and essentially everyone's saying we have to shift care out of the hospital into the home environment because we need to free up all these hospital beds because of the pandemic. And that was us having the right product, best product in the market at the time, at exactly the right time when it was needed, as our problem space became, that's a nice to have into an essential, and off we go. And then there's some fascinating stories about decisions we made in that time period. One of them that I tell is we characterize this as, up until a point in 2019, 2020, we'd probably built 1,500 individual hardware devices. There was a single contract during COVID that required us to build 10,000 units in 3 months of our Gen 1 device. We probably had no right to achieve that from Scotland, no right to think about how we would. We just said, yes, we will, and we'll go for it and bet everything on it. And, yes, we'd have probably crashed and burned had we not, but we brought in new manufacturers. All our kind of final assembly was in Scotland, so we had to bring everyone back in our manufacturers as key workers so that they could build the actual devices while everyone else is on lockdown, to go to a second manufacturer and kind of dual track it so we could produce the volume. And then from there, we're just going. Another fascinating story about how we just kind of keep growing and keep growing. In 2021, we were approached by Best Buy, having just raised our Series B, very just raised our Series B. And for us, it was the right partnership at the right time, right for the individuals and right for the business more than anything else. And we just decided that's a good time, it's the right offer. We think this will be accelerated for the business, and so we sold to Best Buy, big electronics retailer in the US, in November 21. Wow. And 2 years later, let's just say large corporate, I knew going into that it wasn't going to be for me for the long term. And in fact, the Chief Operating Officer role gets distributed in that organization pretty far and wide. I would joke and say what I was actually doing probably went to 20, 30 different people inside Best Buy over the course of different times, just because that's the specialisms. Yeah. I'm very much a generalist. Yeah. And so I did the 2 years, and now I've kind of taken a step back and on to new and interesting different things.
Great. What a journey. I'm struggling. I'm sitting here going, where do I start? Yeah. There's so much to get into, and like individual stories there. We spoke previously about that decision, about you've done 1,500 kind of machines in Current Health, yeah. And you had that order come in, and these opportunities can sometimes come out of nowhere on a random Tuesday afternoon. Like, how did you think through that from a software engineering background as well in your head? Like, how would you think through that sort of problem or challenge?
Well, I think one of the things that software engineering gave me was a broad systems thinking versus is it solely about software? And actually, it wasn't really a decision made on logic. It was, do we think we can achieve this? And actually, do we want to? And I think it came down to, we felt that if we sat out the kind of COVID growth potential, we would never be the business we wanted to be. And so it was very much actually, are we willing to take this risk? and try versus whether we actually knew we could. And I think that's part of, if I look back over the 20 years and I look at why the startups have been successful, we've kind of said we could, whether we knew we couldn't, whether logically the rationale for doing it was there or not. So it's almost like you're the person that says, yeah, I'll do that. I've never done it before in my life, but I know I can work it out, and I trust myself to work out how to do it.
Yeah.
And if you do that on a business scale, you're kind of more willing to take those risks and say, yes, we're at this game. And I do say that we wouldn't be as successful. I don't think current health would exist now had we not made that decision. Because someone else would have, and we would never have been able to come back and compete against that.
So belief, I think, is a really kind of key thing in business, and I guess in life in general, and it's a difficult thing to build up. But you mentioned there, you kind of had the belief that this was the right thing to do, and we can do it. We don't know exactly how we're going to do it, but we believe we can.
Yeah.
How did you kind of, I know there'll be other people involved, but how do you kind of build that belief up in your decisions and what you do?
To be honest, I think that was what I learned very first on in that startup. When I was the only engineer to start with, and it was kind of split between two other startups, like a technology provider and the startup itself. And it was kind of like, well, you're the only one. And at that point, I had, coming out of university, yes, I could code, yes, I could deliver software. I had no idea how to actually run an e-commerce platform or build one, or what that meant, or some of the security requirements around card processing, any of that. Nor did I understand actually anything about customers. And actually going right in at the start and essentially being solo engineer with a team of experts that are running the company, you're kind of saying, actually, I don't have a choice but to. And then even through Skyscanner, I went in and through that, and I say I had 20 jobs at Skyscanner, it was all about saying, actually, I'll just do it anyway, because I will learn something. So it wasn't much about belief that I could. It was a belief that I wanted to learn, and that I then feel that by learning I'd be able to grow and do stuff. So it's definitely approaching it from the perspective of, from a personal side, I'll learn something. And actually not being too afraid that we might screw it up. As you get more responsibility and more sense of ownership or more kind of bigger position, those decisions have a bigger kind of blast radius, so you can do more damage if you screw it up. But actually, if you build the environment where that's okay, and part of it is you're the lightning rod for that, you're kind of saying to the team, look, if I can make a mistake and admit it and move on, the team's more willing to make decisions and make those mistakes, and therefore the business moves forward. So it's very much around going right back to the start where you didn't really have a choice. And I think that's what you see with a lot of founders, which is they've had to start and learn a whole bunch of stuff that they never thought they would. And they're these real broad generalists. Their level of depth in different areas is debatable, but that's the same for all of us. And so how do we leverage that and just become, and certainly in the next 5 years, my view is from an individual perspective, generalism is going to be more important than how you think about, I'm a specialist. Particularly in software engineering, for example, I don't think in 2 years, and in a short time scale as 2 years, an engineer should be able to say, I'm an iOS developer, or I'm an Android developer, and that's my specialism. I don't think that will help a business grow. I think they're going to have to think about how they become more, I'm a generalist engineer first, I solve problems first. I just happen to specialize in iOS or Android and any other platform, because that's the way technology has taken us. And certainly from the conversations I have with technology people now, and the code generation, whether you're using Lovable or whether you're using something else, Cloud Code or Copilot to support development. I'm like, well, if you look back at the history of software engineering, it has been a progression of abstractions against problem solving for decades. And this is no different. your core job is not to write the code. Your core job is to solve the problems
Yeah.
in the most effective and efficient way you can. That has never going to change. You should be able to do it more effectively and more efficiently now with some of the AI supporting tool sets. But they can only solve the problems that you describe and how you describe them and how you think about them. And I think that's some of the challenges that engineers will have to face, is putting their stuff more into context.
Yeah, it's less about learning syntax and more about concepts, problem solving, abstract thinking. I think it's quite interesting. There's a kind of a question I kind of want to get into, because it's a bit similar for me. So I come from a software background. Like the back end, there's some back end software doing like database modeling and development and that, and then into .NET and stuff. But that's another question. And that background in software engineering, I guess one of the questions is, why was that for you to begin with? And then do you think that some of the core concepts around problem solving, not knowing the whole answer, but being confident enough that you can get to an answer, is that where it kind of, the embryo of this journey started?
I think I was always technical, but I wasn't that soldering type of technical. Like, I was always fiddling with things. I remember actually my first coding experience, it took a long time to remember this, and it was a game called Paperboy on an old like Amstrad, and I think we'd stolen one from my dad's office, so probably shouldn't say that too much. But anyway, we end up with this Amstrad, and it's a tape thing, and you get these box, and you're literally copying the code out into the box, and it gets recorded on these blank cassettes. And everyone else has their own ZX Spectrum and Ataris, and we had a couple of those kicking around, but it was on this where I worked out that if you changed a few things, you could make the newspapers. Paperboy was this thing where you were riding a bicycle on the screen and you're throwing papers at it. It's old school. Yeah. But if you change some of the code, you could make the papers explode.
Oh wow, what a feature.
Well, I think it was probably already there on a higher level, but I worked out how to, if I just changed that, and that was how I got into it.
Oh wow.
And different things, and I remember, when we got our first PC, I remember, credit card bill on dial-up modems, illegal downloads back in the day.
Allegedly.
It never really happened. There's no evidence left. But so I was always messing around with that kind of thing, and that got me into, well, let's go and do computer science. It was interesting. So I'm from Carlisle, and it isn't that, that kind of computer science was far too early. I couldn't do it at A level. I couldn't do it even at college. So I went to university to do a computer science degree, having never done any kind of programming at school or education. And I worked out I was never the best at programming. But what I could see is, right, this is how the paths to solving that problem. And these are the logical steps. Yeah. So I think it's more the systems thinking than sheer software engineering. Yeah. And then you take the system that you built and then you deploy it at scale. How do I scale? What's the scale nodes for Skyscanner? How do I serve 80 million active users a month? Yeah. And then when you get into an organizational role, you kind of look at the organization and say, well, the problems are the same. The systems view is still the same. Okay, you've got a lot more complex components, which is the people, and you've got to work that one out. But actually how you think about scaling the organization is very similar to how you think about scaling a technology platform for mega millions of organizations. And so there's kind of rubrics that I kind of apply. Yeah. Like one of the scaling laws, power laws or whatever that I've always used since my Skyscanner, actually, how do I operationalize and scale this, has been designed for 10x, implement for 5x, deploy for 2x. And it's kind of like that scale, right? So I know if in my day-to-day running of a web server, 2x will handle most peaks. But I know that if I need to go bigger immediately, I can get to 5x. And realistically, with a bit of tweaking, I can get to 10x, but I haven't gone and tried to implement 10x. How is the organization any different? And when you start to apply those rubrics to how I think about the organization, I start to think, well, what are we Xing here? What is X? Is it number of people? Is it number of customers? How do we think about that And so you think about the long term while still staying in the moment, and that kind of deploy for 2x is, this is where we're here and now, but you're still thinking about where the future's going to be, which is your 10x. And that's how they connect together.
It's like having an engineering lens on.
An engineering lens on organizational design. I quite like the operating system. When people talk about the organizational operating system, it properly lines up with how I see the world.
Yeah. And did you get frustrated that there wasn't kind of some reliable metrics around that organization side of it? So when I was in the tech side of it, it's great because if there's a problem, I'll see what information we've got about the problem, and then it's mostly accurate because it's mostly kind of metrics, and then you can say, all right, the bottleneck's actually here. Everyone thinks it's here, but the bottleneck further downstream, I can solve that, boom, we're away. But then when you get in the people world and you go, this person doesn't talk to that person and they don't really communicate well, and I've actually never seen that person in office. And it's
I think that's it. That's why it becomes more complex. And actually, it sounds crazy. Half a million data points a second processing is quite a complex system in its various moving parts, but it's actually more complicated. And that's the difference between complicated and complex, which is complex you can't just understand and keep in your head, and it's that complexity. But that's where the excitement is. That's where you get to learn. And I had to learn it. I had to really learn the people side. And there's people along the way that are, that I credit with helping me. Like, I remember when I first managed a team, I was all about, like, I've no idea what I'm doing. I never had any management training. I was all about, like, copying what I'd seen elsewhere. Yeah. And it was very much command and control. And a few months in, someone who was actually CEO of the company said, you're screwing that up. Okay. I knew deep down it wasn't quite right, and so now he's just told us to screw it up, and why? And so actually sometimes that's what it takes, is having someone to say, nah, you're about to screw that up, stop. Don't make that mistake. Think about it this way. And it's just that learning curve of being able to say, how do you adapt? How do you understand it? And when it comes to organizational metrics, also recognizing you've seen it before, but also not relying on it. I think it's too easy to go and rely on data and not actually what's in front of you. And so I've learned to say, actually, I'll make decisions not solely on data or having not enough data. And I'll go back and, another kind of rubric is, if I had more data, would it really change the decision I'm going to make? Or do I know what the right decision is and I'm just looking for validation? And if I'm just looking for validation, then it's too late. I should have made the decision already.
So tell me about that situation where you're getting feedback from, is it your boss, CEO, about your kind of leadership skills, about what you're doing? Like, how did you take that on? What was going on in your mind around that? And
I was young. Like, this is my second job. It's quite different. I joined as an IC and kind of inherited the team, which is kind of the way many people do. And it was shit to hear. I'll be honest with you, it was really hard to hear. But when you step back and once you get over the emotion, you can say, actually, that's why it wasn't feeling right. And today I'm very grateful that he said it, because he just said, look, it's not working out, see you later. And that's all good. But then, how can I do it better? Is that any different to, I've just deployed this thing and it's broken. Why is it broken? Oh, I didn't think about this. Well, how do we fix it? And going back and saying, how do we fix it? So it still has that analogy of how you think about things. And it comes back to, like, I'm not that afraid to say, look, I screwed up. And there's always a point. There's always a point where, well, you screw up big enough, things change, you get fired, those kind of things. And it's all relative to that environment and how big those decisions are. But knowing and being comfortable with that is kind of half the battle.
And I don't know if it comes from I could go back to that software engineering background of, I'm similar. You go out with a plan and you're trying to create a solution for the problem as you see it there and then, but a lot of the time it's a bit like software. You test it and you go, it's not quite right, I'll make a tweak, or let's go backwards, it's worse, right, let's back that out, let's try something different. And being used to, like failing, winning massively, and everyone just sees the winning massively, but they didn't understand like all those other points where you were pulling your hair out going, I can't do this.
There's always times when you're doing that, and the pulling your hair out and saying I can't do this is part of that journey. There's always that reaction. I think you've got to take yourself out of that situation. I don't know whether it was software engineering iteration and software engineering, and is a interesting part of like parallel, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's all because of that. It might be the way that software engineering suits me, or problem solving suits me, because that's the way I'm wired at it. That's far too deep, and I couldn't tell you, but I think it's that sense of I'm quite happy to learn stuff. I'm quite happy to go away and say I don't know this, but I'll work it out and I'll learn stuff. And I think it's that more than anything else, that ability to say I'll learn something new and enjoy that part of the process, even if that initial thing is that failure mode.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes out of like intention as well. What was the intention of the decision? Intend for it not to work. Like everything I knew at the time, I tried to make it work like this.
That's my new favorite word when I'm speaking to founders and startups now, which is like, what is your intention? How do you be more intentional about some of your organizational decisions rather than falling into them and being reactive? I see that quite a lot. I see that quite a lot because having lived through that, you kind of react to the situation and you say, well, but can you be more intentional about putting how that situation is in place? Decision making, what's the boundaries around these decision making? And a lot of it comes down to like businesses that are talking about adopting AI. It's like, well, one of the things there is the out of control. What if Betty's using OpenAI, and what if Jemima's using Claude? And how do I balance that in my organization? I'm getting something different. I'm like, you want to encourage your team to, but be intentional about what boundaries you want to put in place, and what that kind of within the context, rather than just say, here's your open door to go and try and play with these tools to see how much they make you better at your job. Yeah. And so the more someone's intentional, the more it kind of comes out. Yeah, and even as a not an entire shortcut, but a more focused way to get to the successful bit. Because that whole, if you go in with just a reactive nature, it's normally a kind of going around a circle of all this breaks, we learn all the time, and then we ended up at a really good place. Whereas the intentional bit of it is just a funnel to go, we're going to try less things out and get to where we want to get faster. Yeah, and I think businesses grow directly proportional to the speed of good decision making, is the way I put it. But it's that, what is good? And it actually means it's an intentional decision making. It's, did you think it through? Did you think about the 2 or 3 consequences of that decision? Didn't spend hours or days or weeks looking at all the risks, but you did enough to think about what might happen if. And that can take minutes. Like, I'm not talking about spending hours doing big risk assessments. It's actually, did you pause, make an actual decision with intent, and then move on? And that, I think, is often what's lost when people are being entirely reactive to what's in front of them. Yeah, so it's kind of taking that time to make the decision. Because I guess earlier in my career it was similar to yourself, the way you described it. I solve problems. Like, I still just solve problems. I solve problems for companies instead of individuals now. Like, that's what I love to do. But there was a point where it wasn't the frequency of how many problems could I solve, how quickly could I solve them. It had to take a step back from going, well, actually, I'm not just going to do 8 hours of coding and try and get through as much as possible. I need to sit back and go, right, as a team, are we delivering the right quality? Are we delivering the right thing? What happens next? All that sort of thing, the kind of wider bit. Whereas when you're younger in your career, you're like, forget about that, just do more. Yeah, and I think part of it is, it's easy to say, and it's easy to say this is the way it should be, but in the moment, it's also totally easy to be totally reactive and make those on-the-fly things. Those on-the-fly decisions that you kind of say, no, don't be more intentional. And we've all been there. Like, my entire journey is littered with those kind of decisions that have been reactive to certain situations, and now I'm trying to learn to say, actually, yes, you want to be speed of your delivery is important, but the direction is as important. So yes, go fast, but make sure you're going fast in the right direction, otherwise you're kind of making it worse.
Yeah.
And that for me is the real nuance of how you become. And I see it a lot when you have companies that are, say passing that kind of 10 to 25 kind of team size, 25 to 50, 50 to 150, where there's a lot of friction around how the company is scaled and decisions. And you get that 20-person company where the CEO is the one making all the decisions.
Yeah.
Still, and it's like, well, that's because you can make them because you have the context and you have all of those. But that's not gonna. And it's fine now, but when you're 50 people, that's not gonna work.
It's a systems problem.
And that is a system problem. And it's, can you be intentional about how you help others make those decisions? Otherwise, you're going to end up in a position where you're the only person making decisions, or important decisions, for the organization. And then you feel like you're fully in founder mode and what that means. And actually, for me, that's because you haven't been intentional about getting everyone else to make the right, good decisions.
Yeah, and I mean, having loved some of that, of going through the learning of why you've got to do that, it's if you're intentional why you're doing the business, why you want to be successful, holding on to all the control and all decision and all power making in a company is not going to get you where you want to go. That's where you see burnout, stress, really terrible decisions, all that sort of stuff.
And ultimately, it slows everything down. Like I honestly believe the success of the company will be proportional to speedy decision making. Because if you've empowered everyone at the front line to make those decisions that are important, then you've got that parallelization possible. If anything's going through you, you've only got so much one's capacity is only so much to actually think about something. And even though you're probably in the top 1% of kind of that orientation and level of smart, like you just can't keep up.
Yeah. And it's a whole new problem because you've gone through the ranks, you've done all this, you've got more and more responsibility and reports, and then you get to the point of going, well, I now need to learn something entirely new, which is being a leader of leaders.
Yep.
How do you keep leaders accountable, but without having too much control over what they're doing? And that's a whole new thing to learn.
And and actually, the company has to evolve. What worked. I think when you're a very small company, a lot of that kind of context is an osmosis effect. Everyone hears everyone conversations, so everyone is aware of everything. And actually, everyone feels involved in every decision, irrespective of who actually was involved in that decision, because you're all condensed. When you get to 20, that's almost impossible. And actually, when you get to 50, and you'll start to see this with some of the earliest employees who start to feel disconnected from where decisions are making, that creates frustration. And so you kind of have to think about that of how do they find the right position in that organization as the organization has shifted. And when, the 1 in 5, they feel involved, they feel attached to everything, they lose that feeling at 1 in 20. And it's worse as you get bigger. Yeah. I think Skyscanner was 1,200 when I left, which over 8.5 years going for 50, it's completely evolved pretty much every time. And like that's how organizations have to stay true to who they are, but they have to evolve in how they think about things over time. Otherwise, it stops working.
And to kind of talk about something I've kind of seen in your story so far is that ambition.
Yeah.
That I think definitely where we're from, and you hear about we can live in Edinburgh. We've done so much in Scotland, all the kind of inventions that's come along the years, the Enlightenment, all that happened right here. I don't know if that goes on to the kind of psyche of having to prove, prove we can do it, prove we can do innovation here. But when you mentioned earlier about why you chose Skyscanner as being that's what I want to do. I want to go involved in making a unicorn. I think that's something. Well, from a Clear Sky point of view, we want to do that. We want to find companies that are successful in what they do, but make them massively tech enabled, and bring our best minds to do that here in Scotland. You made the same decision when you went to Skyscanner. Why?
Well, I think there is an ambition there. I think for that, that time was the professional challenge. the e-commerce platform was doing great. It was top, I go back to that startup there's a reason it's still going 20 years later. How would you have taken that worldwide? And I think that's ultimately why I made a change at that point was, well, I wanted more. I wanted a bigger challenge. I wanted more users, I wanted that. And so it was that professional challenge. But actually, I think we do have a challenge in Scotland with the ambition piece. So if I look and say, why isn't there a next Skyscanner, FanDuel, Brewdog, all of these unicorns, I think there is a lack of ambition, and a lack of ambition earlier, which means some of the things I'd done. So where are the founders and people? And Chris was the same. Like, he used to come out as founder CEO of Current Health. He used to come out and say, we are going to be a big business. We are going to change the way healthcare is delivered, but we're also going to build a hugely successful business. And so he had that ambition as well. And I think we tend to knock that ambition. I think I've been having a few conversations on this recently, and actually I'm not on TikTok, but there's a TikTok video somewhere of Bono on one of these Saturday Night Live type interviews. And he's talking, it's Bono from YouTube, and he's talking about, well, what's the difference between living in LA and living in Dublin, and why does he live on? And he comes around and it's a bit of a joke, but he says, well, in LA, we've done well, we're really successful, we have a big house on the hill. In LA, everyone looks at the house and says, I'm going to be that guy one of these days, I'm going to live in that house. And then his retort is, well, in Dublin, I'm going to get that guy one of these days. And I actually think that's part of our, we don't like ambition. When you say I'm going to be ambitious or I'm going to be a unicorn, there isn't support of that. There's almost derision of that ambition. And I think that needs to change, because unless you want to be that, you're not going to make the decisions that get you there. There's certain things that I would say in both businesses, had we not wanted to be that, Current Health, what I was talking about earlier about 10xing the scale in 3 months of hardware production and making that decision. Had we not been ambitious and taken the safe route, we would probably have not made that decision. And I don't think that decision was the easiest sell to people who were necessarily our investors at the time, but we knew that if we didn't, we wouldn't be the successful business we wanted to be. Yeah. So a lot of that risk is tied to the level of our ambition that we have. And so we should be saying, and we should see more to say, we've proved we can, we've proved we've got the talent, and yes, we need more density of talent, and there are ways that we can do that. But actually, we should have the ambition first. And with the ambition comes then the success. And then from the success, we should follow on with the next one and the next one. And that's kind of where I sit right now, which is, how do we find the next 10?
Well, it's a good way to think of the kind of mindset, and something I've been working on recently is around goals. Yeah. If you talk to any kind of business leader, tech leader, what are the goals that you're going to try and achieve? And you think the goals are good things, but they can actually be really difficult to work with ambition. So you've got the fear goals, which don't present themselves as fear goals. The fear goals that I've seen definitely in other business leaders is we don't want to go out of business, we don't want to lose that client, we don't want to have our team leave. And when you're like that, but if that's your goal, then what are you thinking about? You're thinking about fear and losing and negativity, and that's your decision maker is going to be all based on that. Whereas if it's orientated towards that positive, it's let's just go and be a unicorn, because we can do it. Other people have done it. We've got the people. We can get the funding. We can work it out.
So it's so true, and actually I think this is where a clear statement of where you want to be is more important. And actually, it's not where you as a business is going to be. It's why is the world going to be different because you exist? Is a different way to frame that problem. And that for me is more of a vision than I'm going to be a top 10 company or a unicorn. That's part of that. But actually, the world will be different. If I go back to Current Health, and this is why the Best Buy alignment, these are the words of Best Buy, but are our kind of mission at the same time, which is we see a world where the four walls of the hospital are only there for surgical and emergency cases only. That's a very clear how the world will be different because we exist. And we're the platform that enables care at home for everyone. So in those like dozen or so words, there's real clarity on the impact and who we are. That's vision and mission, clarity. And every goal should be assessed from how does that help us get there? Is that the right thing? And that for me is the strategic thing around, you've got your short-term goals, but actually the long-term horizon has to be connected. And how you think about that and how do those things move forward. I think that's the real ambition piece. Even the way I say that, this is how the world's going to be different because we exist, is kind of ambition in its own right. And that could be anything from a local, small mom and pop store type thing, or it could be something massive. But it's how you're going to change that world is realistically how to think about it.
So ambition like a beast that grows if you feed it, right? And you've been through a unicorn, you had the mass success with Current Health. What's next?
Well, I think for me, it's how can I find 10 more of them? And 10's just a random number and it sounds great. But it's like, how can we find 10 more of them? I think I'm not personally interested in how do you build an ecosystem. I think Scotland should be doing more in building more Current Health, more Skyscanners, and with that comes more success, builds the pathway for everyone else to follow. And so I'm like, how can I leverage the experience that I've had, make it a little bit easier for everyone to scale? Because it is hard. You're not going to take away, as you're growing, I'm sure you know how difficult it is. There's those real hard times, and it's painful. How can we make it just a little bit easier? Because everyone's business, everyone's context, everyone's people, everyone's team is different. So there's no one pattern fits all. There's no education program that will teach you how to scale. What I feel is missing is how do we get those that have been through that journey involved in those businesses in a way that can be meaningfully make it easier for them to scale. And so I kind of growing this small portfolio that says these are going to be good people, great teams that are looking to scale with the right ambition, fairly varied in sector, primarily anchored in Scotland or UK at least, and they want to be big businesses. And can I leverage that experience to help them move forward, I think. But saying I want to do 10 is partly saying we need to have an ambition to be at least 10.
Yeah, and it's that accelerator, right? That's the fast track. The numbers about how many go out of existence when they try and scale like this.
Yeah, and I think that's what's when I think about other ecosystems or other places where there is a cycle of regular cycle of building hugely successful businesses. Maybe they hit unicorn, maybe they don't. But by any measure, what does success mean? I think a lot of that is because experience gets cycled and that allows you to shortcut the next one. And there's this almost growing, as businesses get bigger, there's this concept of institutional memory. How do we get an institutional memory into Scotland about how to build successful businesses that scale globally and are meaningful? Can we produce the cycle of that? And I'm not saying that that's there's a right way or a wrong way to do it. I think it's just going in and helping businesses and helping them build the business is the best way to do that.
And like we said earlier, you don't know how you'll make each one of them specifically scale, but you can, right? There's a belief there that's been throughout your whole career.
Yeah, and I think that is. I know I feel I can add value. This is what worked elsewhere. I think there's all these frameworks that you could choose to take from the book, or even for us, back in the day it was, are we going to adopt Scrum, or are we going to adopt XP, so the software engineering, agile frameworks that everyone's telling you. There's nothing in those frameworks that is wrong, it's just that the collection of things as they're applied prescriptively generally doesn't work for every business in the same way, but what you end up with is these are these tool sets. And when you apply the tool in the context in the right way, and so over the course of 20 years, I found this works in this situation and can be adapted to this other situation, but it doesn't work elsewhere. And when these scenarios or this circumstance doesn't exist, it's not going to work. I think it's the same. You hear about agile adoption. Companies that are not traditionally tech businesses but have a tech team, delivery and the mismatch in alignment on what delivery is versus is huge. And actually, you try and close that gap, and you say you need to think about this in a different way, because it's not like, it's more creative than how you think about your kind of funnel and your sales. So you can't apply that pattern. That's a pretty typical conversation early on, but then you've got the other side of that, which is, yes, but are that tech team actually delivering value for the business? And how are they deciding what's valuable for the business? Yeah. Because actually in that scenario, I find that there's this misalignment between tech as a enabler for growth, and that kind of, how do you bridge that? In tech companies, it tends to be we've grown so very fast and our processes don't work anymore, or what we thought was working, or you end up with 20 engineers working on 20 different things and nothing actually getting done. All these patterns you kind of seen before, but it's not so much apply this solution exactly as written to this, because the context means it's your ability to then adapt and make something that works for that organization and helps that organization. And then when it stops working, change it.
And that's something we talked about previously, around that cycle of you put a system in, a people process, and it's great at first, and then it starts to lose its effectiveness a little bit, and then your kind of fingers are pointing around going, oh, it's the wrong system. It's not. It's just for that time it was right, and it's time to evolve it with everything we know now, or did it change itself?
Absolutely, and there's changing things that come in and change that. Like the systems that worked when you're all in one office, suddenly you've got two. And actually Skyscanner was this. So Skyscanner, back before it moved into Quarter Mile, we were in Stamp office, and then we had a secondary office on Princess Street, which is pretty much directly over Waterloo Bridge. So less than 5 minutes gap between them. Yeah. The change, if you're the person trying to move between those offices in order to have your meetings or whatever, you still collectively feel like it's one office rather than treat it as two different things, and then you have to adapt. So the systems that was working when we were all in one space didn't work. Yeah. So you know that. And then it's the same sort of time we're open in Singapore, so that's an even different thing. How do you manage a company when you're on different time zones? I think back, there was a point in my career at Skyscanner where I had a team in Singapore, European teams, so Barcelona, Sofia, here in the UK, across multiple UK offices, and then Miami, and this was kind of when I was looking after engineering for growth. It's almost impossible to manage that time zone wise as an individual from the UK. There's a good overlap on either sides of that, but so you then have to change how you think about the systems, because it goes back to that decision making. If you're Miami versus Singapore, there's like 24 hours before a decision can be, before the kind of communication can happen, and suddenly you've lost 48 hours, and so you can't have some kind of central decision making at that point. So it has to be pushed out. Otherwise, it's a slow death march. All those things apply whether you're Skyscanner back in 2014, 2015, 2016, or whether probably clear sky today.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is you've lived a lot of those journeys, and you can fast track it with the kind of skill ups you're working with now. In terms of either Richard as a person, or if you think back to when you're making that huge decision to move away from where you'd kind of built up, you felt comfortable in a kind of smaller company, and then the career change was you wanted to work at massive scale for the potential unicorn at Skyscanner was then. With everything you've learned since then, like all those great decisions that you got right all the time, and the rest of them right, what would you say if you could talk to yourself back then before you joined? What would you say?
I would just say, just do it. It's hard to go back and say, make a different decision. Honestly, in 20 years, I believe I've probably had 40 years worth of experience in that 20 years. Like that's the lifestyle, and you wouldn't have got that had you gone through a different career path. I've been able to change lifestyle, understand where I am and that leads to different decisions now. but ultimately I wouldn't go back and change anything. I would encourage and just say, just do it, keep learning, keep moving forward, because otherwise it would turn out differently. Like, it's hard for me to say I'll go back and change something when actually I feel I've had a very successful career.
Yep.
And what would I change that would make that any different?
Yeah.
But I think the thing is, encourage that mindset.
Yeah.
I think today, and we talked before about kids and what kids is. I think that's what if I was looking at the kids growing up, I'm like, make decisions that will help you grow and learn. I'm not so fussed about what you want to do, or whether you're interested in music, or whether you're interested in software engineering as I was, or whatever. Do what you want to do what makes you happy, but also look for that growth opportunity.
Keep learning.
Yeah.
That resilience.
Yeah, I joke, like I'm the guy that will get off at the bus stop and walk forward 500 meters rather than get off and walk back 100 meters. Like, that's the way I talk about it. I'd rather go forward than come back. Yeah. And that's just how I think about it. Is this going to move us forward? Is this going to move career forward? Great. Is it going to be interesting and engaging? The interesting thing for me is I've worked every hour, 20-hour days. We've all been there, done that, and that's a level of sacrifice that sometimes it takes to. But it was never, the reason I've changed things, the reason I moved out is, even leaving Skyscanner, I haven't been there for 8.5 years, and it's still growing, it's a great company. Whereas I kind of felt, right, the balance isn't right. I'm not learning as much as I was. I wasn't engaged as much as I was. I wasn't enjoying it as much as I was. So I could work as hard as I want, but if that is out of balance. But if I'm learning, I'm engaged, and I'm happy with what I'm doing, the level of investment that goes into it doesn't matter. So I don't get burned out because of the stress of the decision making. I get burned out because I'm not enjoying it and engaged or not learning something. Like, the bigger the decision, it almost doesn't matter to that. That was never my thing. Yeah. And actually, through Current Health, I've always said, look, part of it is I'm not too high, I'm never too low. Pretty steady in how we think about things, and I think that's important, an important balance within a team. But it's then how you can take that forward and say, like, am I enjoying this? Is it still fun? Is it still engaging? And maybe that says a lot about why I was never going to stay much longer past when Best Buy took over Current Health.
Yeah, seems like the orientation of the decisions is all on those lines as well, right? That's exactly. And a natural extension to what you do now, right? Yeah. Where you'll massively be engaged, kind of the ownership part of it, the giving back part of it as well, be massive to that.
I think that's it. Like, I'm having to learn to support without that level of ownership as well. Like, it's new for me going in and saying, here's the things you can learn, and then not necessarily being the person to then take that forward and action that. Yeah. Not necessarily the one to make that decision. So I work with a bunch of CEOs, it's their company, they make the decisions. All I'm doing is providing support and guidance. And that's quite hard for me. Like, that's kind of a difficult one, because I'm like, I know you're just ignoring me, and that will be an I told you so in 6 months' time.
Especially because you're a problem solver, right?
Yeah, and that comes back to, and just getting comfortable with that is kind of that next level of experience for me. Yeah,
different mindset.
Totally different mindset. And there's some customers some people that I work with where there is a bit more, you go in and you spend a bit more time, you're a bit more direct and make a few actual decisions. But it's very short and sharp. You go in 2 or 3 days, maybe help them get them to the right decision, and then step out. And so it depends on the way of working.
Try to keep them on roughly the right direction.
Yeah, and it depends on the relationship, but it's born in, like, I wouldn't have a relationship with a company that I don't think I can add value to, or I don't want to work with. It comes to the team first, necessarily, more than the problem they're solving. And if that's what I would look for. Does the team have the right ambition? Is the team good? Are they open to different ideas and different perspectives? Can they adapt to a new world? And is what they're looking for that opportunity? that's more important to me than are they in healthcare or are they in fintech or what the actual business is.
Yeah.
Because I think it is very much around people. Like helping the people be successful will ultimately lead to a successful business, and kind of cascades through from there.
It's kind of what you're saying there. Keep them engaged, a vision they can believe in.
Exactly.
Support them. Yeah.
There's always a large degree of luck, being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Right, even that first startup job, I got through some introduction from some Scottish enterprise program that was matching grads with startups back in 2004. And you kind of other options, kind of grad program at Microsoft or grad program at insert consultancy here. And I was just doing that route because I wasn't really that interested. That was the fallback, and it's right company, some good people, good product team, obviously successful. It's all about what business they want to build, what their ambition was. So, but good set of lessons. So there's always a degree of luck. Skyscanner got right product, right time, current health. It's hard to say that pandemic came along and you're saying, well, that was a real positive event for us in terms of growth. But you also have to be in that right place at the right time too. So it's kind of like that.
It goes back to what we said. It's like a belief and an openness to opportunity. Loads of people just put blinkers on and don't see the opportunity that's in front of them, or it's maybe not as apparent at first glance, but it's you look back and you go, oh, you couldn't have written this story.
No, and even if one of the stories from Skyscanner was we were releasing the first mobile app. So I was running web operations at the time, so shit went wrong. I think it always went wrong. That was always scalability, and you were kind of running operations, kind of like DevOps before it was DevOps, or kind of SRE before it was SRE existed. And we were saying, okay, how big do we think this mobile app's going to be? And I can't remember what month we released it, but anyway, it was something like 6 months. Bon, who was one of the co-founders, was looking after engineering at the time. He was like, yeah, probably at 75,000 downloads by the end of the year. Yeah, okay. So you kind of work on that basis. And so we had this capacity, we knew where traffic was, it's all API driven. So kind of knew where things were. Okay, so we carved off this. Right, we'll send all the mobile traffic up here to here, because if it blocks anything, it's gonna not damage the main.
Yeah, de-risking.
So we were doing this de-risking. So we carved off this 10% capacity. Turns out that we unreleased startup on a Friday, which shouldn't be a thing, but is a thing, right? All I do is don't release anything on a Friday. And it's still a thing, even though it shouldn't be. And this is pre-continuous delivery, pre-all of this stuff. So 2012, I would say, 75,000 downloads inside the first 12 hours. And that was the scale of Skyscanner, right? So even though we thought generally travel apps weren't a thing at the time, yes, there's the whole apps, but it wasn't very transactional. People weren't making transactions on apps at the time. So we were a bit slower than maybe others were to the app world. But yeah, off the charts. App is falling over. It's midnight on Friday into Saturday. I'm on support because that's what happens when we did a big release. And you got Gareth phoning, Bon phoning, Barry phoning. Predates Mark. So everyone's kind of like, what's going on? Honestly, I spent more time on the phone than actually fixing it. Yeah. It was literally going and change a few load balancer rules to open up the whole pool to everything, and but that's an indication of just how big Skyscanner was without us really thinking about it, and two, how you think about planning and capacity and things like that. So from that, it was like, well, Bon's never doing capacity planning again. First and foremost, he's out by 6 months, and we're going to do something different. And so you learn the lessons, you move on, but that's just one of those things that you wouldn't get if you didn't have that scale. Yeah,
and you've kind of got to live it as well, though, right? This happened to a lot of people similar to that in your careers, and that's when you really know how much of the, you can read lots of books and try to work on your mindset, but when the shit does massively hit the fan, you find out who you are.
Well, yeah, and like that wasn't just a scale problem or a Skyscanner problem or current health problem. Current health had its own challenges in terms of reliability, but it's also other challenges, and it wasn't okay to have issues like that. So that was a totally different proposition. But even back that first Christmas of the e-commerce gift voucher, this is 2004, 2005, WorldPay goes down over Christmas. And WorldPay is one of the bigger kind of merchant acquirers. And so there was thousands of lost sales. And that business was basically, we'll process the payment and then we'll reimburse you. So there was thousands and thousands of lost sales in the peak period of Christmas, as you can imagine, gift voucher sales, right? So by next March, we're implementing this switch so that we can have a backup. So if one transaction fails because of a server error versus a decline, then it will fall back onto a different credit card processor. And, that in itself sounds really weird, but now there's a business in Edinburgh that's basically built a business over doing that, solving that problem. But back in the day, you just had to work out a way to solve it. It's really fascinating how a lot of the things you learn come from things going wrong in some way, and you're having to do that. And again, you can systemize that. Companies at scale are saying, like, we had this outage. Why did we have it? Are we doing true postmortems and learning the lessons, and actually implementing change through? And sometimes it's organizationally, sometimes it's product, sometimes it's tech. Doesn't really matter. I speak to sales org in the last month, and I was like, well, how many deals have you lost in the last period? Oh, X, Y, and Z. Why did you lose them? And there's a bit of we haven't looked at that. Like, well, if you don't know why you've lost that, how are you going to know not to repeat the same mistake?
Are you learning? Are you learning anything from us?
Did you learn anything? And there's a bit of, we're on the wheel, and it wasn't the right time, it wasn't the right opportunity. We're beaten by an incumbent, and there's a bit of why were you there in the first place then? Like, did you understand enough about it? So can you improve? So it's not just technology, it's actually pretty much every kind of organizational system within the business that you're saying, actually, where can we improve and get better? That might be tech, might be enablement, for all of the things, and getting people closer to those customers. So with Current Health, we implemented every sales call was recorded, and we used to play it back for product team, so they could hear the customers say, rather than have it cascade through. The salesperson says this, the salesperson says this to Chris, the CEO. So Chris, the CEO, then tells the product team, this is what he said. And you've got this whole telephone effect of the message being lost. Like, here's the gong recordings and the transcripts, go and watch it. And you build in that feedback loop to customers that doesn't exist as you get bigger. And I think that's one of the things that as businesses scale is lost. That sense of who's the customer, what are we doing, are we delivering value? You hear software engineers complain about being on support all the time. Like, you don't use this product. The only way you will hear about real-time problems of the stuff that you've built is by hearing customers complain about it.
Yeah, you don't need to guess how to make your product better. No. You can listen to your users.
Not anymore, and that tool set's constantly improving. In the last few years, you can plug AI in and get all those messages. You don't actually have to watch the videos anymore. But equally, even then, that abstraction, I'm a bit like, is that always a positive? It's great for scale, but actually, if it's creating a disconnect with the actual customer voice, is it always going to be great? So there's this balancing act that we can kind of move through on how you think about that link between, are we serving value for customers? And actually, the one thing I learned from operations is sales doesn't end a contract and it doesn't end at implementation. It ends at like the 1,000th or 100,000th usage of that thing of when it's been sold.
Yeah.
So if you sell 100 licenses and 6 months down the line only 10's being used, it's not a good sale.
Yeah.
So actually, how can you join up that entire customer journey so that pre-sales you're thinking about actually what's going to be the most valuable for this company or this customer versus what's going to be the most valuable to me? Because selling 100 licenses when they only need 20 is more valuable to the salesperson because of their commission and how that gets paid versus in the long term, lifetime values and high risk of churn is totally screwed because you've sold 100 licenses when they only really need 20.
Yeah, there's a difficult renewal conversation.
Yeah, and actually we went through that current health because everyone went and said, to get people out of hospital during the pandemic, there was a whole bunch of funding, government funding, that meant it was practically, there was a limitless amount of money. And one of the challenges coming out of the pandemic for current health was we realized care at home is essential. We just don't know how to operationalize it. And in operationalize it, how do we make it sustainable? So we can't buy 500 licenses on the prospect that we may have 500 patients, which is what was happening during the pandemic. It was, we are going to build programs that serve 20 or 50 patients, and then we'll add another 20, and then we'll add. So there was a more operational plan for this rollout. Yeah. And so you've got customers where you're having different conversations with around what you did during the pandemic is different. And actually it's that operationalization, which is why we moved from just being, we were a platform and technology, but why you introduce kind of nurses and logistics services. All the services that actually go back to, we're a platform that enables you to deliver care at home. The technology, the wearable remote patient monitoring are one aspects of that, but actually in order to operationalize that program, you need help here and here as well. And we can offer those services because that means you can move faster and you can move as a customer and get there.
Yeah, more valuable service. Yeah, and I guess recent news that Current Health bought back.
Yeah, Chris took Current Health back. I think what's interesting is that, healthcare, and you see this a lot with, Walmart, Amazon have all talked about being in healthcare and health technology. I think there's a real difference between health technology and healthcare, that like how you deliver care and provide a piece of technology to do two different things. And I think there's this misalignment, and ultimately, 2021 comes, I would still say everything and every discussion was this is the right fit. Times got a bit different at Best Buy. Is health really a challenge? There's a little bit of what I refer to as sugar daddy syndrome. You get acquired by this big thing and there's lots of money, so you take your eye off the cost management. I think that's part of it. But Chris taking back, if anyone's going to make that successful, Chris will. Yeah.
It's just like everything we've talked about there. Yeah. It was right then, pivot, the times, new challenges, new opportunities.
Yep. It's right for him, and he still wants to solve this problem. He's bought in. There's still kind of keep it touch, still help him out on different things, but equally, 2021, 2024 is a different time, and life's moved on. So, for me, totally happy and supportive, and help them to grow, but I'm interested in new challenges.
Yeah, sounds good. And I think the bit I was looking to finish up on was the. So I'm looking to put together the AI enlightenment community in Scotland, UK. One of the areas we're looking at just now is, well, how do we become the most successful country in AI and what we do? And that's quite an ambitious thing to say, but it's like that whole orientation thing where we should have unicorns here. Like the talent's here, it's massively here. We've got great ways to grow new talent here. There's not like that restriction in this part of the world. What do we need to do as a society, as a group of business leaders to make sure that we make the most of the opportunities that are coming up thick and fast?
Yeah, well, I think there's a few things to unpack there. I think firstly, AI is considered with the progress that ChatGPT made, that generative AI model, that kind of its progression is anchoring what is AI today. And actually, I think AI is much more. I don't know, if you want to talk about where something like super intelligence is going to come from, it's not going to come from ChatGPT, much as they would like to say it is. It's actually one component as part of how is AI going to interact with the real world. So when you look at Waymo or even Tesla, and we can talk about whether that's a good thing or bad, like the autonomous vehicles where real-time decisions are acting within the real world. Yes, it's powered by some of the same kind of generative technology that is in ChatGPT, and that's one component, but actually, so I think there's real opportunities at that intersection between real world and artificial intelligence that's undertapped across the world, and we've got that with the Robotarium. We've got a high degree of consideration. So I think looking at AI from a much broader perspective than just the generative lens is super important. But I also feel there's a narrative right now, as I was saying earlier, that AI is about efficiency and effectiveness and taking people's jobs. And it is a technological wave. But if you go back to kind of the advent of the internet, and then from the internet into mobile, it was all positioned as creating new opportunities and high growth. I think we've got to step back from AI as an efficiency play and make it into a growth play.
Absolutely.
Creating new opportunities versus being more efficient at the existing opportunities. If we can change those two narratives and bring those together, I think there's a real opportunity to stand out. I do think we're going to see some self-serving nationalistic interests over the next few years. You can see it already with some of the moves with the US and China, and who's using what models and where those models are and what data is powering them. I think that becomes a bit of a race, and there will be some sovereignty issues. So I do think we're going to have to think as a UK as a whole, where is our AI models being built and served, because it can't be from the US. Which means we are going to have to invest in data centers. And then for me, you step that back and say, if you're going to look at data centers and at the power consumption, Scotland's the right place to do that because of its renewable growth. And I'm not just talking national grid type level. Actually, how do you put localized power generation next to data centers and build them such that that can power? And I think we can lead on that because we've got the right conditions for that. Nuclear's too slow, certainly here in the UK.
And China's way far ahead.
Way far ahead, but for, if you could put power generation and a data center in between the power generation and the national grid, you would potentially, because we pay wind farms to switch off when there's too much power for the grid to handle, which is madness because it's billions of pounds. We pay them and okay, they're happy. Why can't we use that power before it hits the national grid? Now, obviously, there's a whole bunch of complexity in that that's well beyond what I think, but
also simple as well, right? There's simplicity there as well. It makes sense.
And you're going to do that with solar, wind, and you're going to have some kind of battery in there. And, is that going to work? There's a whole bunch of technical challenges. But I think that concept of we need more data processing power in order to support the AI models that are going to be British and UK and Scottish. And we're going to need, therefore, the power. Yet we have the power generation capacity today. That feels like a perfect storm if someone wants to solve that problem.
And that whole orientation around unlocking growth, it's got to be that. If we focus only on efficiencies, that's going to have a really negative outcome on people. And people are always going to be a core part of what this growth's going to look like. And that belief, we can do it. We've got. It's not just the potential of energy. Scotland's massively energy rich, and the UK could be as well. In terms of tidal, wind, even the nuclear stuff around what we were talking about earlier. It doesn't have to be huge nuclear power stations. It could be small thorium reactors, and we could be getting ahead of that as well and going, how do we adopt these years?
Nuclear's always going to suffer the regulatory problems that it's suffered for years. We can't seem to get anything by way of nuclear power across the UK, and I'm not close enough to understand why that is, but what will enable us to, I think if we rely on, say, other people to provide other countries, and today we're primarily we're talking AWS or Azure, all American. Obviously there's stuff from the rest of the world. Then I think that's risky. So if we want to enable our own growth, we're going to have to invest in our own data processing capability, which will then unlock growth from data-intensive applications.
Yeah, and it's all connected, right? So like the thread is clear looking back, where you get kind of blockchain, and you need the cloud compute, and then you get cloud compute, so then you can do big data, and there's loads of data, and then there's more cybersecurity required, and then, well, AI needs tons of compute, and tons of compute needs tons of power, and it's...
But then, between Glasgow and Edinburgh, we've probably got two of the leading quantum university research across both of them, and they'll probably argue over which one's the biggest. Obviously, Edinburgh has the EPCC, but the Performance Computing Centre. But that's two in a relatively very small geographical area, inside a commute for a Londoner. How can we make more of that?
Yeah, and you've got quantum robotics.
Robotics is a big area of research. Obviously, you've got the Robotarium out at Herod.
It's all there to play for, right?
So, yeah, and it's also different. So it's like saying we don't need to play in the same world as ChatGPT or Claude, and there are companies doing really well looking at smaller language models or very specified language models for businesses, and that will continue to be the case. But we don't only just have to play in generative AI. There's a lot that are working in, say, computer vision AI technologies for healthcare, for infrastructure monitoring, for others, which is just adjacent. And I think we've got to spot the adjacent opportunities, because I don't think we're going to build a company to build a UK model like ChatGPT or like Claude today. But how do we leverage that type of technology a lot in something more adjacent? Yeah, is where the opportunities are going to be.
Yeah, it's like it's the most niche opportunities as well. Like take robo lawnmowers. Yeah, it's like to get them effective and mass produced, price had to drop, components had to get smaller, price point had to get reduced.
But if you take the technologies, the SLAM, the LiDAR that drives those autonomous vehicles, and is what's been miniaturized and put in your lawnmowers, and now making it cost effective to build automated lawnmowers at scale. Where's the next? That seems relatively easy. Robot vacuum cleaners, it's like here's a surface area, go and just go over them, and everything else will just work. Look at construction industry. Where's the next evolution in that going to come from? Yes, there's talk of 3D printed buildings, but actually some of the problems on construction sites, how do you work at scale? Window cleaning. Yeah. Can you have you look at Edinburgh and it's tenements. Can you build the equivalent of a lawnmower to do your window cleaning? Yeah. Yeah. Because of the height and everything that goes with it. How you get the water up there becomes the challenge, but
yeah, new problems to solve.
New problems to solve, right? So there's, and if you want to do that, that's the fascinating bit.
Yeah, it's what gets you up in the morning. Solving problems, right? New technology.